B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Monday, April 16th, 2018. The tax deadline is tomorrow because today is Emancipation Day in the nation's capital. If you need the extra time, I hope it comes as a surprise to you. I had to pay Uncle Sam big bucks on Friday to square things away for 2017, and I hope that the process isn't too painful for you. So on Friday night, Trump suspended his Twitter wars so he could launch a photo op missile strike on Syria. And this was carefully crafted for domestic video consumption. It really was just Pentagon theater. And it was fascinating. I heard Trump make the announcement, 9 p.m. Eastern, that missiles were flying. And, of course, he couldn't help but lie. He made a claim that last year, in retaliation for the alleged release of a chemical agent in Khan Shaykhun, Syria, that his missile strike had destroyed 20% of the Syrian Air Force. And that is such a joke, because the incident on Friday, just like the one about a year ago, was telegraphed to the Russians in advance. And Mad Dog Mattis was on TV Friday night explaining just as soon as the first round of missiles were launched that, hey, it's over. Don't retaliate, Russia and Syria, please. This is just for show. And we launched almost twice as many missiles this time as we did last year. That's the kind of stuff that Trump loves to brag about. And then Saturday morning, he tweeted out, "Mission accomplished." To the scratching of heads around the globe, what's the mission? What's been accomplished? This is simply a signal of selective outrage over the alleged use of chemical weapons. And while I am no fan of chemical weapons, I don't want to be, misinterpreted here in any way. But is it really better to die when a Hellfire missile comes off an unseen American drone and screeches into your house, killing all present? Is that materially and significantly a better way to die than the release of chlorine or even sarin in close proximity? And so the way that we respond to certain types of violence and not others, I find just truly bizarre. And it's all political. Because there's no outrage over the latest sniper killing of a Palestinian in Gaza. Last week we reported that there are 5 Democrats who have made tepid statements that they're not comfortable with what Israel is doing, but they don't denounce it. And has anyone spoken up and said, gosh, the cholera epidemic in Yemen, the daily bombing raids by Saudis who use American resources for refueling, for restocking the munitions that are used, and for targeting? We're deeply involved in that on a daily basis. And there was a little skirmish in Congress recently, but we're not hearing any references to Yemen, as some Democrats do criticize Trump for not consulting Congress, not getting congressional approval for this new military action. Now, that's political as well. I agree Trump should get approval, but Obama didn't. Bush had the blank check after 9/11, and Congress has deserted when it comes to its obligation to weigh in on decisions to go to war, how to do it. We'll pay for it. Congress continues to fork over billions and billions of dollars to support the Pentagon. But they don't want to be tagged with responsibility for the decisions to use the American killing machinery. And, of course, we were joined by our wonderful allies, France and Britain, in this very brief assault on Syria for the benefit of domestic audiences. And Macron of France, Emmanuel Macron, said that Syria had crossed a red line that had been established by France in May of 2017. British leader Theresa May described the attacks on Syria as right and legal. And she seemed eager to join in as payback to the United States for joining in on this response to an unproven release of chemical agent, to the unproven story of the Skripal's attempted poisoning in Salisbury, England. And so this becomes very much about sending a message to Russia via Syria. And as you know, I remain skeptical of the claims. I mean, on the face of it, like many people, it's easy to believe that Russia was responsible for this attempt to poison or kill Sergei Skripal, and his daughter just happened to be around. But where's the proof? And the more British and American authorities try to just claim and assert that Russia did it, there can be no other culprit. Well, the story just kind of wriggles away like a fish on a dock. Meanwhile, the war of words continues as Britain is blaming Russia and Syria for preventing the inspectors from the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons from accessing the area of Duma, where we are told that on April 7th, now 70 people, the initial number was 40, were killed in this alleged chemical weapons release. And once again, the effort to try to come up with a motive for Syria to use a chemical weapon at this stage where it is winning its effort to both eviscerate and eliminate the proxy fighters who have populated its country for 6 or 7 years now. So Syrian and Russian officials have told the inspectors that there are still pending security issues to be worked out, and I can't really evaluate whether these are legitimate reasons or not. The one thing I can say is that I have many friends, listeners, people who email, and they say, Peter, you're a little too cautious. You're a little too circumspect. We all know that this is a frame-up, that this is a false flag. And while I'm highly suspicious of that, and I don't see any evidence to prove the contentions of Syrian responsibility, I believe that anybody who flatly tells you they know is bullshitting. And so I had an email from a great listener last week saying, hey, look, because over there at Veterans Today, Gordon Duff is flatly saying that there was no chemical release. Well, I've looked at Veterans Today, and I have interviewed Gordon Duff. He's interesting, he's colorful, he's a former spook, and I don't find him consistently credible. So you can criticize me, and I accept it. I am not above criticism. But I will continue to call them as I see them. Norman Solomon, my friend who wrote the book about War Made Easy, How Politicians and Pundits Lie Us into War, well, he's got a new piece, published at Consortium News over the weekend. The missile attack on Syria is a salute to the Russiagate faithful. He notes heavyweights in the U.S. media spent most of last week clamoring for Trump to order airstrikes on Syria to prove that he is not Putin's bitch. Now, that's not what Norman said. He's always he speaks proper English. He said to prove that he's not a Putin lackey. In recent months, Solomon says, the profusion of war hawks, spies, and liars on national TV has been part of a media atmosphere that barely acknowledges what's at stake, with games of chicken between the world's two nuclear superpowers. Meanwhile, the dominant U.S. media imbue their reporting with a nationalistic sense of impunity. The latest air attack on Russia's close ally Syria was as much politically aimed at Moscow as at Damascus. But let's be clear. The pressures have not only been generated by corporate media and the political establishment. Across the U.S., a wide range of people, including self-described liberals and progressives as individuals and organizations, have enthusiastically participated in the baiting, cajoling, and denouncing of Trump as a Putin tool. That participation has stoked bellicose rhetoric by congressional Democrats, fueling the overall pressure on Trump to escalate tensions with Russia. And, I have a habit on Sunday morning. I do not turn on the TV. I find that Face the Nation, Meet the Press, and what's on ABC, the Stephanopoulos interview show, I think they're a waste of time. It's posturing people who recite talking points back and forth. But yesterday we turned on the TV because I wanted to get a weather forecast, and there was James Clapper, now a paid contributor to MSNBC and the NBC network. Chuck Todd was asking him for his opinion. James Clapper is a proven liar. He committed perjury in public. It's one of the triggering events that led Ed Snowden to go rogue. And Matt Welch, who is the editor of Reason Magazine, the libertarian platform, he has an op-ed that appeared in Friday's LA Times, noting how the resistance of Trump swoons for stars of the surveillance state. And he's a libertarian, not a liberal, and so at first he kind of slams the Republicans via Alan Dershowitz. And then he says, what's also depressing is that Dershowitz may be right about the Democrats. In their efforts to oust a potentially lawless president, they are exalting a rogues gallery of surveillance state officials who have abused their power. Take James Clapper, the man who oversaw a vast surveillance apparatus of Director of National Intelligence under Obama, is now the toast of left-leaning media, including Salon, The Guardian, Huffington Post, and NBC outlets, as I mentioned. California Democrat Adam Schiff tweeted his Clapper endorsement last year. James Clapper is a patriot who served his country for 50 years, knows dangerous bluster when he sees it. So yes, he's an authority on Trump. And as I pointed out, Clapper did lie under oath right there on the TV. And Welch goes on, it's difficult these days to get the latest resistance news without encountering some of Clapper's partners in government malfeasance. One of MSNBC's latest hires is former Obama administration CIA Director John Brennan. Like Comey, Brennan is one of the more melodramatic voices on Twitter, delivering stern lectures to a presidential interloper who dares impugn our noble intelligence state. And then Matt Welch points out the dark side of John Brennan, when he created a constitutional crisis and accused Dianne Feinstein's Intelligence Committee investigators of a breach of their agreement, and it was the CIA who was lying about those investigators. Welch continues, by uncritically cheering on such flawed actors, the Trump opposition is sending a clear, if unwitting, message to future abusers of power. To rehabilitate your image, simply oppose the president with enough flowery adjectives. I predict we will hear more such performances, complete with applause from progressives during the upcoming book tours of Comey and former CIA Director Michael Hayden. And he closes with this. But if in these fraught political times we're taking our moral cues from a gang of former intelligence officials, then our problems run deeper than and will outlast the current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Auntie Lundberg, the incredible Faith Peoples. She's been a supporter for a long time now and very generous. Benny Alto, he's got multiple subscriptions. And Sandra Fish. They all kick in $5, $10, $20 a month. You can do it too. And my birthday is coming up Saturday. I'm turning 65. I don't play games about my age or the birthday thing. But I would be really, really gratified if we can get 20 new subscribers to the Peter B. Collins Podcast in the 10-day period here before and after my birthday. So can you work on that? Maybe recruit a friend if you're already a subscriber? Or maybe get off your perch there if you've been listening and you can afford to subscribe, but you haven't. I'd appreciate it. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com, and you find the menu button, menu tab, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. Takes you to the sign-up page, and boom, you can make a choice there in just a couple of minutes. So I mentioned that Trump did take a break from Twitter so he could watch some of the video coming in from Syria. But he resumed his virulent attacks on James Comey. And as you know, I headlined Friday's podcast calling him St. James Comey. I don't think that Comey is here to rescue the nation. He's trying to salvage his reputation. And his book is really silent on the critical issues of Trump's alleged collusion with Russia and what Comey knew before Trump fired him. Now, this exercise is rich, and it's also entertaining in a mean-spirited way. So Comey, he gave a 5-hour interview to ABC, and I saw parts of it with Stephanopoulos last night. That's going to be running for weeks. Every outlet is going to get James Comey and give him a lot of time. Every element in his book, including the small hands and the orange skin, is going to be gone over 50, 100 times. And Trump will run out of tweets. So here's one. Comey drafted the crooked Hillary exoneration long before he talked to her, lied in Congress to Senator G. for Grassley, then based his decisions on her poll numbers. Disgruntled, he, McCabe, and others committed many crimes! ! Now, some of this is true, but Trump believes the crimes that were committed were related to him. And I've seen Comey railroad people into prison behind false charges of domestic terrorism. And as you know, I am a sharp critic of the FBI under both Comey and Bob Mueller's direction. But that doesn't mean he can't dish it out on Trump, and a lot of what he says is really true. And, of course, he's gotten closer to Trump than any of us have. Some of it is kind of moralistic bromide, though, like this. Our president must embody respect and adhere to the values that are all the core of this country. The most important being truth. This president is not able to do that. He is morally unfit to be president. Here's another. You cannot have as president of the United States someone who does not reflect the values that I believe Republicans treasure and Democrats treasure and independents treasure. That's a lot of treasuring, Jim. That is the core of this country. He could have added a Lordy here. Lordy, that's our foundation, and so impeachment in a way would short-circuit that. Now, he does make a point that ultimately voters are responsible for this mess. But I doubt that most voters will hear that. All right, more juicy tweets from Trump. The big questions in Comey's badly reviewed book aren't answered, like, how come he gave up classified information? Jail. Why did he lie to Congress? Jail. And why did the DNC refuse to give server to the FBI? Why didn't they take it? Why the phony memos? McCabe $700,000 and more. Now, this is just garbage from Trump's brain. The $700,000 refers to McCabe's wife, who ran for the state Senate in Virginia, and the race was over long before McCabe himself was assigned to either the Clinton or the Trump investigations. So that's just bullshit from Trump, but that's what you get when you shake him up. One more. I never asked Comey for personal loyalty. I hardly even knew this guy. Just another of his many lies. His memos are self-serving and, all caps, fake. So this is going to go on for a while, and hopefully that's the last time I'm going to read a Trump tweet about Comey. I just know I can't hold myself to that. Meanwhile, Andy McCabe, the number 2 FBI guy who was squeezed out by Trump and Sessions just hours before his pension would have kicked in, well, if you take the Inspector General's report at face value, and Inspectors General can be political, well, the review accuses McCabe of lacking candor when he spoke to Comey after an article was published in the Wall Street Journal in October of 2016, and later that McCabe was untruthful to FBI investigators, and then in 2 conversations with investigators for the Inspector General. So the bottom line here is that McCabe asserts that he had his own authority to provide commentary to the Wall Street Journal because they were developing a story related to the FBI's investigation of misdeeds at the Clinton Foundation, something that I think is still very much needed. We can't expect it to be fair in the current climate, but I believe that there are issues to be exposed at the Clinton Foundation. So, once again, this is punishment for an official leak. And Washington is rife with official leaks, as I'm about to get to. And so, yes, I believe that Andy McCabe got caught leaking and lying about it. But he's not the only one. He's the only one who's been caught and punished. So today, just as I began to sit down to record the podcast, news broke from New York and the courtroom of federal judge Kimba Wood. She had ordered Michael Cohen and his lawyers to return after a session on Friday morning related to Cohen's efforts to preview the materials that were grabbed under the searches last Monday before the government gets to look at whether the attorney-client privilege would protect the communications or the documents. And at issue is that on Friday, Michael Cohen and his attorneys represented that as a lawyer, Cohen has only represented 3 people since Trump took office: Donald Trump, Elliot Broidy, who we'll get to in a moment, and a person who Cohen did not want to name. And after some skirmishing in the courtroom this morning, Judge Wood said, "You must disclose that now." And under that order, Michael Cohen acknowledged that the third and the client he had tried to keep confidential is Sean Hannity of Fox News. Now, this explains a connection and the reason that Sean Hannity has been the most reliable ass-kisser of Donald Trump since the campaign began. We don't know what matter Michael Cohen represented Sean Hannity on. So far, Hannity hasn't been accused of any sexual harassment or affairs. And that's primarily what Cohen was doing for Trump and for Broidy. So this gets more and more interesting. And the exposure of Cohen is similar to exposure of Trump. And I know most of us cover our eyes just imagining. Never let that bathrobe part. So this guy, Elliot Broidy, is a rich mofo, and he's tried to get even richer by cozying up to Trump, championing the interests of the United Arab Emirates. They gave his security company a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So he has cashed in on the ascension of Trump. And Elliot Broidy admitted on Friday that Michael Cohen had represented him in a deal where he paid $1.6 million to a former Playboy playmate who he had an affair with and got knocked up. Now, we're told that the playmate, who is unnamed, chose to have an abortion without any pressure from Broidy. But she also got the $1.6 million. Now to more substantive issues related to Cohen. And let me begin by noting that most people in the United States believe that the Mueller investigation is leak-proof, 0 leaks. Friday night, I was with some friends, and I told them that, Trump had just launched the assault on Syria, and I made another comment about leaks from the Mueller investigation, and my friend Patrick said, "Oh, really? There aren't any leaks from the Mueller investigation." Well, I've got 2 articles based on leaks that couldn't come from anywhere else, except maybe the Skripals in England. So this story broke from McClatchy late on Friday the 13th. The Justice Department special counsel has evidence that Michael Cohen secretly made a late summer trip to Prague during the 2016 presidential campaign, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. Now think about that. They're not naming the sources. That means this is a leak. Who else would know that Robert Mueller has evidence that Michael Cohen went to Prague? Now, this has been, an issue of dispute, and Cohen has produced his passport to BuzzFeed. Say, look, there are no stamps from Prague on there, but it's possible to fly into Frankfurt and take a train to Prague and not have your passport stamped. So I've never believed that was a legitimate denial. But McClatchy also acknowledges it's unclear whether the investigators also have evidence that Cohen actually met with a prominent Russian, purportedly Konstantin Kosachev, an ally of Putin in the Czech capital. And the allegation is that they had a discussion about European hackers working to undermine the campaign of Hillary Clinton. Now, if this pans out, if this leak is proven, like so many leaks before it, this could be very incriminating. This could establish the claim of collusion that so far has been asserted but never proven. So we'll continue to watch on that front. And by the way, I will be persuaded if evidence is presented. This isn't that. This is evidence of leaks. And this is leaks of alleged evidence. Meanwhile, my pal Jason Leopold, who is taking the leaks and running with stories over at BuzzFeed, he broke a story on Friday the 13th. A former Russian spy helped Trump's business team seek financing for a Trump-branded tower in Moscow during the 2016 presidential campaign. This connection is known to special counsel Robert Mueller's team. Right? The leak-proof team? But BuzzFeed is not naming the Russian agent because two U.S. intelligence officials, also not named, those are anonymous leakers, said that doing so would endanger the agent's life. So this is also a possible connection that goes well beyond the bumblings of George Papadopoulos and the British professor Mifsud and those stories that we've seen so far. And the implication of the story is that Felix Sater, the guy who was an FBI asset for years, maybe still is, he and Cohen were trying to get this deal going in Russia, and Sater contacted the former GRU officer in 2015, and they were put in touch with one of the banks that is on the American sanctions list. That bank has denied that it discussed financing anything for Trump. So these are very interesting threads that are surfacing, but they are still unproven leak-based allegations. We haven't come that far, and we're hitting almost the 2-year mark on this Trump-Russia saga. The Boston Marathon was run. Desiree Linden, a 34-year-old woman from Michigan who came close in 2011, came in first, and congratulations to her. But this also marks the 5-year point since 2 bombs exploded at the finish line of the 2013 Boston Marathon. And James Henry, at Who, What, Why, is still waiting for important documents about the mastermind of the case, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, to be declassified by the Director of National Intelligence. Now, this has been promised for years, and Who, What, Why has filed numerous claims. Let me find it here in the story. It's tens of different filings to get the documents released. Here it is. Who, What, Why has submitted more than 85 FOIA requests seeking records about Tamerlan Tsarnaev. And so far, it is a stone wall. What are they hiding? We know. We know enough to know that there is information being hidden about his relationship to an important CIA officer. His uncle lived at that CIA officer's house for a while. I mean, the connections are beyond coincidental. And yet, it all remains secret, and I'm sure it's for our own good. In Turkey right now, there is an American Christian pastor whose name is Andrew Brunson. He hails from North Carolina, but he's lived in Turkey for more than 25 years, and he has a ministry in the city of Izmir that I visited once. He runs the Izmir Resurrection Church. He is currently on trial being accused of links to the failed 2016 attempted coup against President Erdogan, and he faces up to 35 years in prison. He is being supported by Sam Brownback, the former U.S. Senator, Kansas governor, and now the U.S. envoy for religious freedom. And his Congressman Tom Tillis from North Carolina has been at the trial as well. And it appears that this is leverage to try to get the U.S. to cough up Fethullah Gulen. He is the murky Turkish imam who is in exile, self-imposed in Pennsylvania, accused by Erdogan of masterminding that attempted coup. And that's the state of play there. Sunday night, 7 prisoners were killed, 17 injured after riots broke out in South Carolina at the Lee Correctional Institution. The 8-hour riot is about 3 weeks after inmates briefly held an officer hostage and took control of part of a dormitory at the prison. I love seeing these teachers revolting for higher pay in extremely red states, the latest Kentucky, where on Friday the Republican governor Matt Bevin lost a veto override struggle, and taxes will be increased to fund raises for teachers. But Bevins, who really went bonkers as a result, he said, "I guarantee you somewhere in Kentucky today a child was sexually assaulted that was left at home because there was nobody there to watch him. I guarantee you somewhere today a child was physically harmed or ingested poison because they were home alone because a single parent didn't have any money to take care of them." He was trying to put the blood on teachers of non-existent crimes against school children in Kentucky. Wow. Did he graduate from Trump University? And finally, a sad note today. David Buckle, age 60, was a well-known human rights attorney who also worked on environmental cases. He was a lead in gay rights cases at Lambda Legal, the national LGBT human rights organization. And on Sunday, he went to Brooklyn's Prospect Park. I'm sorry, it was Saturday. He left a suicide note in a shopping cart near his body, writing that he hoped his act would bring attention to the need to protect the environment. Most humans on the planet now breathe air made unhealthy by fossil fuels, and many die early deaths as a result. My early death by fossil fuel reflects what we are doing to ourselves. And then he set himself on fire. And he died of those self-inflicted burns. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it far and wide. We post it on YouTube, and when you're there, click on the subscribe button there. There's no money involved.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling